Hi everyone, this is a mini tutorial on comprehension and I've titled it It's Not Just About the Words because I think sometimes people think reading is just about reading words on a page. The first sentence of chapter 13 in Fellows and Oakley is very true. Without comprehension, reading is a meaningless and pointless exercise. For example, I could pick up an astrophysics book and use my reading skills and strategies to effectively decode and read the book. But it's very unlikely that I'd actually get very much meaning from that book because of the technical vocabulary and concepts that are way beyond my comprehension. This is the same for children learning to read. So many very young children learn to read quickly and then they hit what I call a comprehension wall because they simply don't have the life experience to understand what they're reading, or their vocabulary level doesn't allow them to have full comprehension. Children often think that reading is just about saying the words on the page. It's important to tell children that they need to think about what they're reading. Self-correcting is often a really good indicator that children are thinking about what they're reading because it means they're beginning to notice the mistakes. They're not just barking at the print. Before we move on to unpacking some of the different comprehension strategies, a word about running record assessments and comprehension. So there are several different assessment kits for reading. There's the PM benchmarks, the Fountas and Purnell and Lexar's, and that's just a few of them. So when I'm talking now, I'm talking about PM benchmarking because it's the most commonly used one and it's the one I know extremely well. But the comprehension comments are probably relevant across the board. PM benchmarks do take a fair bit of time to complete, especially once the children can read at a good level. And it's tempting just to listen to them reading and make an assessment from that, but there are other aspects such as whether the children can retell what they read and various checklists in the assessment that will give you some really important information. Also, in the upper levels of the PM kit, so that is level 15 and above, there are 2 books at each level, one fiction and one non-fiction. This is because you read and comprehend fiction and non-fiction books differently, and the students are supposed to be tested on both books before they move to a new level. Also in the higher levels, there are between 4 and 6 comprehension questions, some literal and some more complex questions. PM says that if a child can answer 2 to 3 of the 4 or 3 to 4 of the 6, the children have comprehension. This is something I actually disagree with, especially if the questions that the children got wrong are the more complex questions. After all, 3 questions out of 6 is actually only comprehension of half of what you've read. Perhaps one of the toughest things to deal with as a teacher is that parents also don't understand that reading is more than just being able to say the words on the page. They assume that if a child can read the words that they understand what they're reading. As a result of this is often quite a lot of pressure from parents to move children up reading levels, and it can be really difficult to hold your ground. So you need to be really sure of what you know about the importance of comprehension in reading and your knowledge of their child so that you can help them understand why their child may need to move more carefully through the reading levels and to move at exactly the right time. Okay, comprehension is quite complex and there are many levels at which comprehension takes place. Students need word and sentence level literacy, knowledge of language, text and words, self-monitoring skills and the ability to apply the knowledge that they have. This is the Fellows and Oakley definition on page 297. Comprehension is a dynamic, complex and strategic process that involves the reader using prior knowledge about the world, about language and about texts to construct and extract meaning. Okay, let's have a look at some different levels of comprehension. The first level is literal comprehension. At this level, children are being asked to notice and remember what the text actually says. This is called right there comprehension because the answer is actually stated in the book. An example on page 300 of Fellows and Oakley is who was dressed up as Red Riding Hood's grandma. This is a literal question because it's stated that the wolf dressed up as grandma. There are 3 main skills involved in literal comprehension: recalling facts and details, finding the main idea and understanding sequence. So recalling facts is the easiest one and the one people tend to focus on. The example I gave you a minute ago is an example of recalling facts. Understanding sequence, often there's an order in a text passage. Things happen at the beginning, the middle, at the end. Questions about sequence ask the reader to remember the order or to put events in order. And more able readers, sequence is more complex and involves the passing of time. For example, the puppies were born in May. They're now 6 months old. Which month is it? Or what will Max and Rob do before they play? The main idea is about what the text is mostly about. Sometimes questions about the main idea might ask children to choose a good title for a poem or a story based on what they've read. On this slide I've included a picture here of an anchor chart that is helping students to understand the difference between the themes in the book and the main ideas, and I thought that might help you also. Okay, on this slide there's a bit more information that you can read about these 3 literal comprehension strategies. Okay, moving on to some inferential comprehension strategies. You'll see as we move through that the ability to pull apart the text becomes more important and the skills and knowledge become much more difficult. So the first one is recognising cause and effect, and this is a really important concept. The cause being something that happens and the effect being what happens as a result of the cause. So for example, I forgot to set my alarm clock, so I was late for school. The cause of being late for school was forgetting to put the alarm clock on. And cause and effect questions usually begin with why or what happened. Comparing and contrasting asks children to think about how 2 things are alike or different and use words like most or different, alike, similar, that sort of thing. Making predictions is a skill that makes children think about what might happen in the future. The answers to prediction questions won't be found in the text, but there are always clues within the text that allow the children to make a good guess. An example of a prediction question is, what will Max probably do when he gets home? Or, what will happen if Anna guesses the right number of jelly beans in the jar? Word meaning and context is an important one and is closely linked to vocabulary because the same word can have multiple meanings, and these different meanings can completely change what the entire text means. For example, the word clear can mean see-through. If you make something clear, you make it understandable, and in other words, there's no murky bits. If the blue sky is clear, it means there aren't any clouds. They're all part of the same concept, but they're slightly different. Again, I've got some more information about those particular inferential comprehension strategies there. Okay. The next one, drawing conclusions and making inferences. This involves the reader reading between the lines to find the meaning. They need to be able to interpret the author's meaning by connecting information that is implicit in the text. An example in the e-text on page 300 was, why did the wolf dress up as Grandma? The answer isn't directly stated. A good answer might be, the wolf is dressed like Grandma to trick Red Riding Hood so that he can eat her. Being able to distinguish between fact and opinion is really important in today's world of social media. Facts are true and can be proven, and opinions are how somebody feels about something. Identifying author's purpose asks the reader to think about why the author has written the text. It might be to persuade or to give information, to describe something or to entertain, and the reader needs to know how to identify the purpose in order to interpret the meaning correctly. Interpreting figurative language can be tricky. We say lots of things where we mean something different from what we say. So, for example, it's raining cats and dogs. It doesn't literally mean that cats and dogs are falling from the sky, but rather that it's raining very heavily. Figurative language is especially difficult for EALD students. Summarising is where students are asked to give the main points from within the text. A good summary picks up on most of the main ideas or details within the text, rather than just 1 or 2. In a world of video games and screens, children sometimes have difficulty distinguishing between real and make-believe. Discussion about what happens in the story or article, about what could happen and what couldn't happen, and why, are really important comprehension points. And I've got some more information about those there for you also. Fellows and Oakley talk about the importance of being able to make connections. This is an anchor chart to help you remember the 3 levels of connection. So there's text to text, which is about connecting what they're reading with something else that they've read. Text to self, which is about connecting what they're reading to their own prior knowledge or something that's happened to them. And text to world is about connecting what they're reading to some general knowledge they have about how things in the world work. Finally, I found this sheet which outlines what good readers do. When you have a look at this list, it's easy to see that reading is far, far more than saying the words on the page. I hope this has been helpful for you. Thanks, everyone.